The trouble is, and we know this from where we are. Cry wolf too many
I will
times.
call this meeting to order at 12:03. Can I have a roll call,
I want to
please?
sit down over.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
You wanted to be chair.
Mike Labar.
Only special.
Directors, we are live now, and our quorum is visual. Mike Labar, Matt Simus,
Here.
Mark Gonzalez, Deirdre Sullivan, Ken Eklund,
Here.
Mike Scatini, Jason Smith, John Bailey,
Here.
Marvin Borzini.
Here. All right, thank you. We have our quorum. Are there any comments for closed session items from the public? No. All right, we will reconvene at approximately 1 o'clock. All right, it's 1:10. Let's go ahead and reconvene. John, can I have the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any reportable action?
No reportable items, Chair.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, any additions or changes to the agenda? Who reports on that? Not that I know of.
None, Chair.
And it says public comment, but I don't think there's any public comment on that. So we will go straight to presentations. I believe Peter's up.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and Directors. Pete Finners with the Water Resource Agency, and I'll be doing a presentation. Let me just take a second to fire it up. All right, good afternoon. So I'm doing a presentation on the summary of the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project's 2023 operational season. So first wanted to start with just how our demand and usage looked like for the past season. We saw, the typical pattern of the peak usage beginning in April, going into September, and it trails off in October. And overall, it had a very, typical pattern. Comparing it to an average SRDF usage year, we fell in right, above or right at average, slightly under by 300 acre feet. The breakdown of the sources, we had 50% was from recycled water. The diversion facility provided 36% with the river water, and then we had 13% from well usage. It ranked about 11th compared to the other years, like as far as usage. Oh yeah, sorry. Is that better? Okay, perfect. So past committee action. So we made a similar presentation that was made to the January BMAC, and that meeting occurred January 3rd, 2024. So to start the season, we did have some impact from the winter storms that occurred in January and March. So that was kind of the big hurdle we had this season, specifically with the river diversion facility. So it really became the year of records, and it really started with the preseason preparation and cleanup. So there's a couple photos there from how the facility looked after the March event came through. We had excessive debris and sand removal that we needed to do, along with damage assessments. So the picture on the left is the facility looking from the entrance gate, and you can see the sand deposited on the facility floor. And then the picture on the right is the regulating weir, and that's how impacted it was with debris. And there's actually a tree lodged in there. You can't really see it. After we took some of the smaller debris out, we were able to get the large tree out and cleaned up the sand. And so what we saw was actually record high water at SRDF, and we had the highest recorded water at the facility. The mark at the top marks that March 23 event. And it was approximately 7.5 feet of water that was on top of the facility base. And this was 4 feet higher than the 2017 high water mark, and that's the one just below it. So summarizing the diversions for SRDF, so we were able to divert 7,668.5 acre feet. And this is actually our highest yearly diversion year. So this graph compares all our past years of diversion, and you can see how it trends with those years. You can see we had that later start date, but we were able to successfully or efficiently divert as much as we could, and we were able to get that amount from the facility. Kind of the graph showed the yearly diversion, and then what's in the background is daily diversions, the bar chart. So that helps with daily volume. Just to let you guys know if you've never seen this graph before. So kind of continuing SRDF. So with this successful season, we were able to offset groundwater pumping by that 7,600 plus acre feet in that seawater untreated area. There's two pictures of the facility operating this season. I had some pleasant weather that day. Just give you some stats. So the season length was from May 8th to October 31st. So that was 176 days. We did have that later startup due to the storm cleanup at the facility, as well as the river conditions during that time. We can start April 1st. That's our window of time of utilizing that facility is April 1st to October 31st. So we went to the end of the season. So the current status is we did complete our irrigation season. That was completed October 31st. We completed the winter site prep. Now we're doing off-season repairs and maintenance with coordination with Monterey One. So we're getting the facility, doing some maintenance to it and up and running for the next irrigation season coming soon. So to go into the CSIP wells, so currently we have 8 that are fully operational and 2 that we pulled for service and maintenance. And we have the one that is in process of destruction. So that is 22L, and that water was classified as seawater intruded. So that will be destroyed with that Prop 1 grant. And the maintenance for these 2 wells actually came about from the CSIP well maintenance plan that we began this year, which we developed basically a systematic maintenance approach to assess the well condition and to prevent, or with the ultimate goal of preventing emergency failures of the wells. So here's a quick summary of the well maintenance plan. So it's a 3-year plan, and our tentative goal is to pull 3 wells per year in the off-season to inspect the condition of the equipment and well casing. The wells were ranked by priority, which the present condition, the length of time between repairs, its age, all weighed into that determination. And the goal is basically to set a baseline for the current well condition of each well over the course of this 3 years. So we began implementation in the fall of this year, or actually, sorry, last year, fall 2023. So we began at the end of the peak irrigation season. We pulled the 2 wells offline and began that assessment. One was pulled because we actually had a known issue with it. It began sanding this year. And the second one was actually the first well in that well maintenance plan. And the 2 wells are 15A01 and 10H01. And to give an idea of kind of the orientation of the system and the wells we're working on, so they're labeled there. They're in the southern end of the CSIP area. So we have 10H and 15A01. Kind of shows the layout of our system if you haven't seen it recently, with the purple, the pipeline, the blue circles are the turnouts, and then the blue triangles are our supplemental wells. The crosshairs are our monitoring stations, and then SRDF pipelines, that yellow line. So yeah, just giving an orientation of those wells we're working on. So our inspection procedure for the well maintenance plan is we're pulling the equipment and inspecting for damage, corrosion, wear, basically anything we can note. And the first step after that is to perform a video survey of the well. And then once we review that survey, we determine the next steps. So the progress on the first 2 wells, it's a bit behind because this was originally scheduled for last month. But we completed the visual inspections, and then we have additional surveys that are in the works that we're actually able to complete now. And those surveys are to really review the well casing condition and provide additional data. We need to thoroughly evaluate the condition of the wells. And then once that surveys are completed and we get the reports, we're able to review and determine the final plan for each well. Next, I can give a quick update on at least one of them. So 15801 is in adequate condition for its age, and we're going to proceed with doing some light maintenance to it and getting it back online with a in-well sand separator. So we'll be able to hopefully get that well online as soon as we have access. That's the biggest hurdle right now, is access to the wells because of the weather we've been having and just getting equipment out there. So hopefully in the next coming weeks we'll be able to have a bit of a dry period and we're able to actually work on the wells. And then 10H we're still in the works of reviewing the surveys that were conducted on that well and determining what action we'll recommend for that well. And then to complete kind of an update on the wells, we actually do have that well replacement funding. So we were awarded a federal grant for $900,000, and we are working on evaluating the possible locations and beginning our first step of reaching out to the landowner of those areas we're determining are most ideal, and hopefully begin the conversation of possible easement extensions, because unfortunately we don't have enough space on our current easements to allow a replacement like the last replacement we did. So that's kind of where we're at with this past season. Are there any questions or?
Thank you, Peter. I will open up to directors first. Anybody on my right?
I got a question. Wasn't there something come up a while back where consultants are involved in checking out the system for improvements?
Are you referring to the hydraulic water model?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, they are doing that. I'm not specifically on that project, but I'm sure an update can be given at a later time. I don't work with it enough to give an accurate update, but it is in progress. I know that.
Seems like that should be, something should be happening there, I would think, fairly soon.
Yes, yeah, I do believe we're working through it. I think there was some, I would say, some calibration needed for some of the components that we were trying to utilize with that water model. So I think once that's complete, we'll be able to move forward.
So this system had like 17 wells at one point?
20.
22? Yeah, it started at 22.
Now there's 8, we're pulling 2.
There's 10 total, yeah, that are,
Total?
yeah. So we have 2 offline currently under maintenance.
How many should we have?
I don't know if there's a determination of should.
Or, I mean,
I think it depends on, I mean, the purpose was to supplement supply. So I think we're under the original design, if that kind of answers the question. So we're trying to, yes.
So the system was designed with 22 supplemental wells. That was enough water 30 years ago to do all the irrigation in the 12,000 acres. That's how we came up with 22. When we got the project online, some of those wells were taken over by this, the project took over wells from the stakeholders. Some of these were older wells, and they eventually just collapsed, and they weren't worth repairing. We had 2 or 3 new wells drilled, and those lasted 5 years, and then they collapsed. So we're down to 10. We had 14 2 years ago. We've destroyed 2. We got 2 offline, and
We replaced 1. Yeah, that's
well, yeah,
we
okay,
replaced 1.
we did replace 1. So
and hopefully 2 coming up, hopefully soon. The process is lengthy, unfortunately.
but that's just a synopsis of how we came up and what, we want to make sure that if everything went offline, no affluent water, no river water, that these wells would be able to irrigate the acreage required.
Yeah.
Any other directors? Jason?
And maybe you kind of answered it as John was talking there too, but I was just curious on how you guys came up with this. I mean, when we have problems with the well, it's because we have problems with the well. It seems like you're spending a lot of money to figure out if you have a problem with the well or not. I'm just curious on how this maintenance program came up, and is this to set a baseline and then you're going to leave it alone? It says 3 years, or what's the whole purpose of the maintenance program?
So the purpose of the maintenance plan is to, yes, set a baseline and then hopefully allow a determination of an interval of preventative maintenance. So one of the things we're trying to get away from is reactive emergency maintenance. So it's like when something breaks and it's in the peak irrigation season. We want to try to avoid that. So we want to try to pull them off in the off season and find preventative issues with it and replace it ahead of time so that we're not in the issue of trying to get something online when there's lead times and
Yeah, no, I get I mean, I like the whole idea of preventative maintenance. Just isn't like looking, of course, and nothing's like looking under your hood anymore. I mean, it all takes extra computers and whatever. It's just costly, but thank you.
Anybody else? Mike?
Yeah. So thank you for the report. Out of the 13%, 36%, and 50% of water sources, how does that stack up with previous years and years when the SRDF is not up on the 50% of affluent?
So I didn't, I mean, we can compare that, you know, right off the bat. I haven't done a comparison of the past years. We compared it to like seasons. So when SRDF was operational, and we compared it to basically if it fell into an average year with SRDF operational, it would, we can evaluate, you know, how it compares to past, you know, with specifics. I think it trends pretty well. You know, demand was relatively, on the lower side, you know, because we've seen up to 24,000 acre feet total. You know, I think we've gone down to, you know, 18,000. So it really shifts. I think, you know, weather has a big impact in how the season goes. But yeah, did that answer?
I just didn't know if you knew those numbers off.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I know there's a lot of numbers
I think
out
it's
there.
important though, right? Whenever we're comparing what water usage we have, is to be able to look back in previous years
Yeah.
where we had
Yeah,
the
we definitely-
SRDF and what years that we didn't. I know we have the data.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be hard to do if we,
Yeah.
it's something we can, you know, work.
And then you said 7,000 roughly of SRDF water. What is our water right for? How much is it?
So I don't know off the top of my head what that actual amount is. I know the facility was originally designed to be able to divert 72 acre feet per day over the course of from April 1st to October 31st. So you know, there's a number out there, but I hesitate giving it. You know, I could, you know, give it once it's looked up and verified.
I think Shauna wants to comment.
Hi, Shauna Murray. We don't have a specific water rate for the SRDF diversions. We have pumping capacity. So we don't have a limit on water rights. It's a rediversion point. And pumping capacity is about double what we were able to divert this year.
Really? Okay. How much bypassed the facility? Do we have a number on that? I mean, I know we're supposed to let through the lagoon. I think it's, 3 CFS?
The bypass requirement changes on a monthly basis and based on year type. And so we met all our bypass requirements. We don't calculate a volume, but we always met our minimum bypass requirements.
I guess I'm looking more for what was above and beyond our minimum requirements. Do we even have a way of monitoring that, of calculating it?
I mean, there's things we could calculate, but there'd be a lot of assumptions in that. We had spill over the weir, which we can calculate, but it's based on a perfectly level weir, which we don't have. So we only measure our bypass through our fisheries and our regulating weir, and we don't have any downstream measuring devices. So it's a pretty hard number to calculate based on, we don't have good data to calculate that.
Do we have a number for how much backflowed into the Blanco drain and into the pure water Monterey?
We do not. There's not a measuring device adequate for that type of measurement.
Any other directors? If not, I'll open up to the public.
I have Bill Leip.
Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah,
We can hear you, Bill.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. I want to thank Peter for the report. It's very interesting. There was a question about minimum flow through the bypass at the rubber dam. I think it's 10 CFS is the minimum, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, of course. Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to answer. It's public comment. So, the number of wells that are still operational, I think that's kind of been sad to watch. You know, there were a large number of wells, and now there are half as many. And I think we all know why they're not operational anymore. But I like the maintenance plan. I think that's a good idea. I think it's kind of surprising that it hasn't been done before this, but I think that's a really strong idea to make sure that we can look at these wells on occasion. I would just ask a couple of questions, and you don't necessarily have to answer them. I may follow up in writing, but I'm wondering what percentage of the conservation releases that are done are eventually make it to the rubber dam and are diverted? Is it 1%, 2%, 3% of the releases actually end up getting diverted in the end? And another question is on the supplemental wells. Do the supplemental wells, are they allowed to run when you're diverting water from the river, or are they mutually exclusive where you can only do one or the other? So I do appreciate the report, Peter, and thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Anybody else?
Nancy Isaacson.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Nancy Isaacson. I too want to thank staff for the report. You know, when Shauna said that there's no water right associated with the diversion at the rubber dam, but there was an expectation. I think it'd be helpful to know what had been envisioned when the Salinas Valley Water Project was approved, because I think, as I recall, it was about 12,000 something. Could be wrong, but I think that was my recollection. So it would be good to, have an understanding what the goal was, what we actually have achieved. And I think another part that would be important would be how much cannot be diverted for one reason or another. I know sometimes when the ponds at the tertiary treatment plant are full, water can't be diverted into there. So how much is not diverted when it could be and is essentially lost to the ocean? So I think this is a really good start, a lot of good information, but a lot of additional information that I think we could glean from what's been working, what isn't, and where we can improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Anybody else?
No hands raised.
Perfect. That was just a presentation, so we will close that. Thank you, Peter. And we will go on to the consent calendar. Looks like there's,
Matt,
yep.
if I could add, I mean, I think what's important here is that we're utilizing the effluent first and foremost to the fullest of our abilities. And then from there, then we're using river water. And then we're using the well water to make up the difference. And knowing all the numbers, knowing those numbers historically as well, I think it's important to be able to wrap our hands around and be able to create a better operational plans. And I know it's difficult to measure the releases and what's going to actually make it to the valley. It's a long, windy river with a lot of variables that can impact it, but I think that we always have to keep our eye on that goal of affluent first and foremost, and try to keep as much of that river water behind those reservoirs for as long as possible.
Good comments. Thank you, Mike. All right. Consent calendar, it's agenda for our last two meetings and the financial report. Can I entertain a motion?
Make a motion to approve consent.
Thank you. I'll second. Thank you, Deidre. And since we don't have Mike online, we can do a regular vote. All those approving, saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstains? All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go to our action items. Looks like Guillermo is up first, looks like, on the contours. Certainly, go ahead, Deidre.
That I noticed, I believe this came to the Basin Management Committee, and that for all the action items, they've gone to committees, but it's not stated in the report. And so it'd be nice, well, it's really helpful if you state if it had been to a committee and what that action was. I know when I read things, when I know it's gone through a committee and been well vetted, it's very helpful.
It's inconsistent, I noticed. Some reports do have that and some do not.
Exactly,
so yeah.
but I didn't see it in this agenda packet.
Perfect.
For any of the items.
Good comments. Why don't we let you guys get that figured out, and we will move on to action item 6, and if Farah's ready for that.
Yes, thank you. So today we are asking the board to consider the adoption of a resolution amending the bylaws of the Water Resources Agency concerning board member participation on standing and advisory committees. So this came up recently in January with the changing of the chairship and a review of the bylaws and the effect of the chair or the relationship of the chair to the committees. The bylaws as they stand now require the chair to be an ex officio member on all committees. And so and if we were to continue to move forward in that fashion, it would have required requesting that some of the folks participating on the Planning Committee and the BMAC step down so that the new chair, Labar, could assume a role there. He was not particularly comfortable with that approach. He was of the mind that if there were good people there willing and able to serve on those committees, that they should be able to continue to do so. He was also, concerned with too much concentration of power around the chair by requiring the chair to sit on each and every committee. And so we had discussed how to address these concerns and concluded that the best step would be this surgical amendment to the existing bylaws to allow the chair to sit on all the committees at his or her choosing, but not requiring the chair to do so. We did take this proposal to the Planning Committee for discussion. The Planning Committee is recommending that the board adopt the resolution amending this. The Planning Committee was also noted that the Salinas River Channel Coalition has been disbanded, but the bylaws still call for a member from the, would we call it an unorganized organization? So, and so they would recommend that we make that amendment as well. And then, you know, I guess the last observation is part of that discussion. The Planning Committee noted a variety of other reasons to update the bylaws, but that would be a more time-consuming and necessarily thoughtful process. And so the decision was made to move forward with these surgical changes, which you can see in red line in the board packet, so that the committees, such as they are comprised, may continue to move forward with their work in a timely fashion.
Perfect. Thank you, Ara. I guess we're looking to give you advice on that.
We're asking the board to adopt the resolution, which is also contained in the packet.
Mr. Chair, before we do that, let me just say, yeah, I was at the Planning Committee meeting, and staff did a really good job explaining why, and I support it, and because of that, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Second the motion.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. I will open up to the public comment.
No hands raised.
Perfect. Thank you. Then we will go ahead and have a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstains? Perfect. Thank you, Ara.
Thank you.
Looks like we're ready for Guillermo. Okay.
So good morning, Chair and committee members of the board. My name is Guillermo Diaz, and I'm a hydrologist here at the agency. Today's action is to consider receiving the 2023 annual groundwater level contours and cumulative change chart. Staff presented this data to the Basin Management Advisory Committee in February of 2024. Activities associated with this program are funded by Funds 111 and 116 and are included in each year's budget. These activities can be linked to strategic plan goals B7 and E1. As mentioned in previous presentations, the agency has different groundwater levels and water quality programs to help us monitor the health of the basin. And the program that we're talking about is the annual survey. This survey occurs every year from mid-November to the end of December, where staff goes out and samples 490 wells throughout the entire Salinas Valley. This survey takes place at a time of the year after the seasonal pumping demands have relaxed and right before the winter rain events. And as such, we can use this survey as an indicator of the year-to-year changes in storage throughout the basin. So now I'm going to show the products of our annual survey, starting with the annual groundwater level contours. So first, here we have our 180-foot east side shallow, forebay, and upper valley aquifer set of contours. And the red lines are our 10-foot increment groundwater contours for 2023. As we walk through the next slides, I will highlight some of the areas and add the 2022 set of contour lines in blue for comparison. Starting near the coast, we saw levels increase between 1 and 3 feet from where they were last year, and as such, the 0 and -10 lines have moved inland. The groundwater elevations at the coast are approximately at sea level. In the east side, we saw an increase between 5 and 15 feet in the northern lobe of the trough, and an increase between 2 and 10 feet in the southern lobe. And this year, we did not see the -70 line. Moving to the area between Salinas and Chular, we can see how the 0 line has moved considerably down valley from last year, indicating an increase in storage. The area of the valley between Chular and Soledad saw an increase between 5 and 20 feet. The area between Greenfield and the north of San Lucas saw an increase between 10 and 20 feet. And finally, the area between the south of San Lucas and San Nardo did not see a significant change. As you can see, the 350 and 400 lines are in the same location as last year. We can tell the general direction of flow, of groundwater flow, based on these contours, which is going to be perpendicular to the lines and always from a higher elevation to a lower elevation. And as you can see, the direction of flow generally moves from San Nardo down valley towards the coast, and in the northern lobe of the basin, the general direction of flow is from the river and the coast towards that trough in the northeast. And now moving on to our 400 and east side deep set of contours. Starting at the coast again, we saw increases between 1 and 3 feet, but we still don't see the 0 line. This means that the groundwater elevations are around 10 feet below the mean sea level at the coast. On the east side area, we saw a lessening of the east side trough with increases between 2 and 10 feet. And then finally, we saw increases of 5 to 16 feet between Salinas and Chular, with those lines again moving down valley, indicating that recovery in groundwater storage. For this set of contours, we see a similar general direction of groundwater flow from the coast and the Salinas River towards that northeast trough. To summarize, for the shallow set of contours, we saw an increase near the coast of 1 to 3 feet, a lessening of the east side trough and the area north of Salinas by 2 to 15 feet, an increase in elevations of 5 to 20 feet between Salinas and Greenfield, and 10 to 20 feet between Greenfield and San Lucas. And south of San Lucas, the levels were similar to last year. And for the 400 and east side deep set of contours, we saw increases at the coast between 1 and 3 feet, a lessening of the east side trough by 2 and 10 feet, and an increase in elevations at valley of 5 to 16 feet. So the second product that we create with the annual survey is the cumulative change chart. This shows a cumulative summary of the average annual change calculated for each sub-area. And this helps to give an idea of long-term groundwater storage changes and trends that we have seen since 1944. So here's our cumulative change chart showing those yearly changes by sub-area. The pressure sub-area is shown in red, the east side in blue, the forebay in green, and the upper valley in yellow. And the level changes for the pressure sub-area are calculated using a weighted average between the 180 and the 400-foot aquifers. The vertical lines represent when some of the major water projects came online. Here we have the same hydrograph, but with water year types in the background to give a context to the changes that we see. As you can see, 2023 was a wet year right after 3 consecutive dry years. And as you know, it was a especially wet year, which explains why most sub-areas saw an increase greater than the last year's decrease, with the exception of the east side sub-area, which was similar to last year's decrease. And this is a similar pattern to what we saw after the 2012 and 2016 drought. So again, today's action is to consider receiving the 2023 annual groundwater level contours and cumulative change chart. And that is all I have for you today. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Guillermo, for your presentation. Very good. I will open it up to directors. Anybody? Seeing none, I will open it up to the public.
No hands raised.
All righty. Well, I think we need a motion here to receive. Thank you, Deirdre.
Second.
Thank you, Jason. And I'll take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstains? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Back in order, back to number 7 here, and it looks like that is also going to be Ara.
Yeah, thank you. And so today's action is to consider recommending that the Board of Directors include funding for the Interlake Tunnel project development in the upcoming fiscal year ending 2024-25 budget. So looking back, work on the Interlake Tunnel project began in 2014, so the agency has been working at this for quite some time through a combination of funding sources, including the County of Monterey, as well as $9.26 million from the California Department of Water Resources. And so, you know, to date, almost $12 million has been invested in the design and planning of this project. Our current status is that the DWR grant has expired at the end of the 2023 calendar year, and that we are working on the closeout of the deliverables. Those deliverables include a draft engineer's report, a draft environmental impact report, and related documents. And so we're working to have those finalized and presented to the Department of Water Resources by the end of the current fiscal year. So at the end of this fiscal year, absent any direction and action, there is no funding that has been dedicated to continuing to perpetuate this planning effort. And so why we have considered and presented 3 different options. And so, of course, the fourth is always the do-nothing option. In option 1, we had suggested a nominal level of funding, largely to be able to provide staff time to pursue alternative funding sources. This project has been running on grant funds for quite some time. Last summer, we began discussions with the Natural Resources Conservation Service about the potential eligibility of this project for funding under the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program, also referred to commonly as PL 566. We've had positive discussions with NRCS and are working in response to some of the questions they have to help work through preliminary determination of feasibility. And so if accepted, they would pick up the project from the federal side and begin their process. That would take a number of years to work through, but could potentially result in project funding from 50 to 75%. So there's a significant opportunity there that is worthwhile to pursue. So that would be sort of the nominal level of effort. The second option would be to continue some of the design, environmental permitting, and in particular the water rights change petitions. And so in this scenario, we're requesting $150,000 be budgeted, with the primary effort really focused around the environmental permitting and the water rights petitions questions, because absent those, it's very difficult to make a determination about whether or not there's any business sense in terms of moving forward with the project. And so we'd want to look heavily at those areas. The water rights petition being, a key factor amongst that. And so that really feeds into option 3. And so the information that we've been provided is that to fully pursue the water rights petition question, we would need to certify the final environmental impact report. And so the higher level of funding here reflects the higher level of effort in order to do that, as well as to engage more vigorously with the state board and those that have submitted their letters of protest in the petition process. And so we estimate that petition effort could take 1 to 2 years, and at a cost of between $100,000 and $200,000. Between $100,000 and $300,000. So the $200,000 jump, from one option to the next is sort of reflective of the middle level of effort. And the big wild card there is going to be, whether an evidentiary hearing will ultimately be required in front of the state board to dispatch the protests, or through discussions with the protesters if they can be addressed directly. If we can address them directly, much quicker, much less expensive. If we have to go through the evidentiary process with the state board, much longer, much more expensive. So we don't know yet, if we're making a commitment at this point in time to move forward in this effort, just how long it would take. Those are our best estimates at this time. Clearly, the project has its cadre of supporters. It also has its cadre of detractors. It seems to me in my limited time here that a lot of the fundamental questions about its value, can it stand up on its own merits, have yet to be answered, right? And so we do have 60% design. We have a sense of what that water supply potential is. I don't know how that translates necessarily into our operations changed or not changed. How is that realized in the ground? What's the value of a third year of drought protection, as an example? And so those are all things that we need to understand better in terms of explaining, the potential value of this project, so folks at the end of the day can make a business decision. But, absent a final question on the issue of the petitions, it's really hard to move in these other directions. And so, is there value in moving the design forward? Is there value in understanding the merits of the project on its own? Of course, but understanding that in the absence of knowing the answer to the petition question really doesn't do us much good, because, if we move forward in those areas and the petitions don't come to fruition, then all of that work is sort of for naught. So that's why option 3 really focuses on developing or finalizing the environmental impact report, and then really engaging in a robust discussion on the petitions. So in 2 years and several $100,000 from now, we're in a much better position to make a business decision about the project moving forward. So, so that's how we came to the staff recommendation. And Director Sullivan had asked about committee, and we did take this to the planning committee and discussed it there. So I will include that in my report next time.
Thank you, Ara. Okay, I will open it to the directors. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, thank you very much for the report. And I support option 3. And basically, if you just think about this, the amount of effort we've spent on this, I really appreciate the fact that the state has been flexible with this, because in the past on some of these things they haven't been. But in the long run, this may very well be, if we can find some funding, really one of the most important improvements we've made to our infrastructure, just simply from a operational flexibility point of view. We're not going to build any more dams. Not going to be any new reservoirs, certainly not in our lifetime. But this could potentially optimize it. And if we can get it bottled up with the answers, the main answers, then we'll be in a much better position to actually, if the funding comes in, because most of these programs is it shovel ready is the question they ask. And if we stop now, the answer would be, no, it's not. We're almost there, but we're not. So I do support this. I know it's a lot of money. It's reassuring this year. We know what we've got in our reservoirs. We know we're going to get, we know we're going to have a pretty good hydro year as long as the equipment stays intact.
Thank you, Ken. I agree with those comments. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll open up to the public.
Nancy Isaacson.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, thank you, Nancy Isaacson. And couple of questions. One, when you talk about the water right process, the Water Coalition is always supported before moving forward to have the assurance of the water rights. So it was a mistake we made with the Salinas Valley Water Project, in that it then subsequently took 4 years, biological opinion, negotiating with NOAA Fisheries. I can see that this could be a protracted process, because there are at least 5 that I know of protestants to the water right petitions, including NOAA Fisheries. So I could see that it could be a protracted water right process and costly. And I think it would be important to have some guardrails, if nothing else, and coming back to you. We actually think it might be premature. Yes, a lot of money. The grant funds have been utilized for the Interlake Tunnel. Along the way, whenever there was a question as to the Interlake Tunnel, everyone always said you had to finish, so you could not have to pay back the grant funding. So now you've gotten to that point, and it's creeping forward and doing a little bit more. So the coalition's always had concerns about the Interlake Tunnel as to how it's really going to benefit everyone and how the water could be utilized. And then now you take that with the competing projects that the GSA is doing. We're just not going to have that much money in the valley. So my question too is, what is the potential cost of moving through the water right process, and then the timing for doing so? One other comment, that my understanding had been that the hydro funds that went to first 200 was 1,000 revenue was supposed to go to CSIP, and then the remainder was going to go to the capital asset management plan. And so I think it would be important to have the funds repaid back to the capital asset management plan, because those funds should be utilized to do everything we can to get the dams repaired. And if the dams aren't repaired, then nothing's going to go forward anyway. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Anybody else?
Christopher Bunn.
Go ahead, Christopher.
Thank you. And just thank you for having this discussion. And again, this is Chris Bunn with the Salinas Basin Water Alliance. And we're very much in favor of option 3 and continuing proceeding down this road and exploring the possibilities with the tunnel. I think with our county and the valley that we live in, I think it's prudent to keep as many options on the table as possible and try to diversify our portfolio of water infrastructure as much as possible for ourselves, but especially for the future, for future generations. So I think it's a prudent choice to go forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Anybody else?
Bill Leip.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Bill Leip, a resident of Monterey County. The Interlake Tunnel has certainly survived some directors, some general managers, and probably many others. It's been talked about for a long time. It seems like you're going to keep pushing forward with it. I just want to say that I think the money could be allocated much better by building a drought-proof option that would optimize the system in the valley by allowing for a lot of pumping near the coast that would be beneficial and create a supply of water that would alleviate the need to release water all the way down on a constant basis. We could optimize the reservoirs that way by lowering the impact of pumping near the coast. So there's a project being studied out there, the seawater extraction barrier. I think that's a project of the future. It's a project for us now to be really looking at in a very intense and aggressive way, such that we can solve the problem that's been part of our area, part of our county for over 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
This is Marvin. I'd be more apt to wait for June 30th to see the report completed, make sure it's done, and then move forward from there, personally.
Thank you, Marvin. Any other director comments?
Mike, you go first.
Go ahead.
It's not often I agree with my friend Nancy, but I tend to agree with her on one aspect, and that is the hydroelectric plant needs work. It's been glued, bondoed, duct taped together. It doesn't run at 100% efficiency. I think the monies could be better spent down there currently. That being said, I'm in favor of the Interlake Tunnel. We just need to find another money source. It's an important program to have in this valley for our children, grandchildren, the next 3-4 generations down the road. If our forefathers didn't have the vision to build these 2 reservoirs, I don't know what kind of shape we'd be in today. So that being said, I just don't like taking hydroelectric money that we haven't had during the drought years to spend on the reservoir. And like I said, we get by, but 29 years I've sat on that committee, and we've done what needed to be done, and that was it. I just hate to take funding from the hydroelectric plant for something that is years, if not decades, down the road. It will be done. I just don't know if I'll be around by the time they stick a shovel in the ground. I have one question. The water rights is the critical thing and a component in this. We need to know what our water rights are. Rather than working on design or anything else, we've got to figure out our water rights. We need to know what it's going to cost us right now just to figure out our water rights. Because if we don't have the water rights, everything we're doing down there is for naught. That's a retrofit to San Antonio. That's everything. It just basically stays status quo. So I'm in favor of looking into the water rights program to seek, well, whatever we need to do. But that's where I draw the line for the time being. And maybe 12 months from now, we look at this again. But that's my belief, and I think I have a pretty good understanding of what goes on at that reservoir and how the whole project works. And I think I stand on pretty good basis on that. So thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
So we have 2 reservoirs. One of them fills up all the time. The other one has only been full once in its lifetime. Every rain event, we have years of rain, I can see the water leaving this valley. Hundreds of thousands of acre feet leave this valley. Those are waters that could be captured, that could be released during these drought seasons. If you look at 2016, when we had the 6-year drought, those waters could have pushed us, made it instead of a 6-year drought, could have made it into more like a 3-year drought. We had lawsuits as a result of those years of drought and not releasing water. The ball has been rolling on this project. I hate to see the momentum stop on that. I think that if we do get some grant funding, that those grant funds could come back and reimburse the hydroelectrical funds. But I think we have to keep on pushing this ball forward. The other projects that Mr. Leip had discussed, those are all good options on the table, but this one is already rolling, and we have to see it to fruition to find out if it's going to be feasible or not. The other project at the coast, the extraction barrier, we don't know yet. I don't want to stop the momentum of this for something that is at the fledgling stages at best. So we need to, I think we need to continue with this. It is a reservoir that we already have that is not being utilized. And this is an easy fix, and our grandchildren will thank us for the foresight that we had in putting this tunnel in if it gets done.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else? Okay, go ahead.
Let me just say this. Yeah, I agree with the concerns. I understand nothing is certain here. If we don't spend the money now, we basically are throwing away over $10 million worth of investments that we've got. Now, most of it came from the state, but we need to know if we're going to get the water right. We may run out. If the opponents want to continue, they could very well, exhaust any funding or enthusiasm at some point in the future. And I would also mention, so I'm still I recommend 3, but I'm also saying this $350,000 is not committed until we approve the budget. So we have up until our June meeting the budget meeting to decide whether or not we're going to have it in there. If we take it out now, it's out, and the staff is going to spend that money someplace else. So I would recommend that we try option number 3. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Deirdre, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I agree that I go with option number 3. I have not been in favor of the Interlake Tunnel because it has distracted us from a lot of the projects, the dam maintenance projects that were desperately needed, and yet I'm for this because I think we have an obligation to the taxpayers of California that put up $10 million. We're talking about a little bit to get it over to, in essence, that finish line to a more shovel-ready project. So I think we need to continue.
Thank you, Deirdre. Well, I have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on that?
I've got, so we got $350,000 for this upcoming budget. What's it going to be the following year? Or the year after that, because it's a 2-year process. So we're looking at $700,000, we're looking at $1 million. And that's $1 million that could go into the hydroelectric plant. And I'm concerned about that. Now, Ken brought up a good point. It can still be yanked or modified in June for the budget. We're not looking at the hydroelectric plant and what work needs to be done there. I mean, if that thing goes down, you aren't generating that money at all. Then where are you going to get the money from if the plant goes down? The hydroelectric plant can't generate the power. So I just have a lot of questions, but listening to Ken, I understand that, there are options down the road that can be looked at again, but I guess I've served on the ResOp committee too long. That's my baby down there, and I just want to make sure that it's taken care of because it never has been. So.
Appreciate the comments. Is there any public comment on that motion?
No hands raised.
Perfect. Well, all in favor of option 3, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. 1 nay. Any abstains? Okay. Passes. Thank you. Move on to key information and calendar of events. Got 3 months of calendars there. I don't know if anybody has any additions or deletions.
Doesn't look like any, Chair.
Doesn't look like it. All right. All right. We're going to go over to the general manager's report then. All right. You.
Goodness, we have to script me in a lot less. We'll start with the fiscal year-end 25 budget preparation update. So March 18th, we have the budget workshop in the morning scheduled. And so that day will be a full day because we have the workshop in the morning and then the board meeting at our usual time. So eat your Wheaties. Staff's been working on the budget and that work is going well. Certainly as we are moving towards trying to develop a balanced budget and utilizing that sort of approach, challenges in the structure of our finances become particularly apparent. And so while I think we will be able to present, a close to balanced budget in a number of funds, I don't think we'll be able to do that in all funds, but work does continue and we are seeing improvement along the way. The other piece of this and the direction we're wanting to move in is the presenting the budget on the basis of programs and projects. And so that is in its infancy. I don't think we'll see a lot of movement between now and our March 1 deadline for submitting the initial draft budget to the county. But we do continue to try and move in that direction. Part of the challenge we have there is because of the nature of the agency's work over the years, we haven't had to track costs in a way where, this particular equipment or this particular material or this particular staff hour were associated with a particular program and project. And so without that baseline information, it's difficult to start building ground up. And so we continue to take that challenge on, but I think given the work that needs to be completed between now and really it's the end of May, and to meet the county's deadlines in terms of the budget development project, I don't think we'll see a realization of that at this point, but it is certainly a direction we still desire to go in. On the financial forecasting model, we did do a fairly detailed presentation to the Planning Committee on the current status of that. I included the PowerPoint in the board packet. That model, at this point, the development work is essentially done. We're going to go through the development of our FYE 25 budget, and then once we get through that, we'll begin the process of integrating, the budget information with the forecasting model so we can start teeing up the discussion about our funding strategies development this summer. And so, as we look forward to the dam safety projects, we've been fairly successful so far in securing grant funding or having grant funding near secured. So we have the $6 million last summer. We have the $17 million that was authorized in the fall that we're wrapping up that funding agreement. We have $13 million more in pursuit. And so we're making some progress in terms of that. Notwithstanding, we know that there is going to have to be a local share. And so how are we going to meet that piece of it? And that's a conversation we need to pick up, later this summer and well into the fall so we can begin to realize the different plans that are on the horizon. And so some of the tools that will go along and informing that, clearly the financial forecasting model is one, reviewing from a legal perspective, our authorities to allocate costs and generate revenues is another piece of it. And then, being able to understand what our debt potential is, and how does that relate to the projects that we have in front of us, as well as the, willingness and ability of stakeholders to support that. So those are all things I see out and through the course of this year with the aim of having a discussion about, these relationships between revenues and expenses, and, by this time next year, end of the calendar year. So out on the horizon there. GEMS expansion, we had the special meeting on GEMS expansion. I thought that went really well, appreciated, all the thoughtfulness there. General manager of the Salinas Valley Basin GSA invited me to her board meeting the following day, so I was able to make a report to them in terms of what we had discussed previously. We've had subsequent meetings to further advance our thinking on all of this with the aim of having an ordinance up for consideration in the coming months. So continuing to make steady progress there, and we'll have some more detail to report at our March 18th meeting. The personnel update, I have the staffing updates are included in the board packet. In particular, wanted to update folks on a meeting that Don and I had with the new HR director for the County of Monterey. His name is Andres Piper. We wanted to discuss with him the concept of developing an agency-specific compensation philosophy. That was a conversation we had started last fall with the previous HR director, and wanted to make sure that before we went forward and expended those funds, we still had a basis of support. I found the conversation with him to be quite positive. He had some very constructive recommendations, which we are following. We have a scope of work that we're in the process of developing, and look forward to getting proposals from consultants and that we can then plug into the budget. So related to this is the potential for our work in this area to impact other county agencies. And so we have reached out to the Housing and Community Development and Public Works departments in particular, because they have like classes that may be affected in this, and make sure that they understand the direction we're going in and whatnot. So we have consideration of their thoughts and concerns as we move forward. So that's where we are in personnel. Shifting over to Monterey One and the reconciliation effort that we've been engaged in. Work on the financial audit will be wrapping up. We anticipate a draft report within, certainly by the end of next week. So, it's imminent. We will take time, Water Resources Agency and M1W will take time to review that report and respond. It is my ambition that we're able to bring a final report to the board on the March 18th meeting. And so we'll just keep our hopes alive to be able to achieve that timeline. With respect to the hydrodynamic modeling and the way that informs the operations of the CSIP system, we have engaged E2 Consulting, who's been involved in the development of the hydrodynamic model. They're electrical engineers to help us sort through some of the metering issues that we have been struggling with these past several months. And so they've been provided information on the various pieces of hardware that have been installed out there, and are working up a proposal to be able to ensure proper calibration and quality data, so that when we do operate the model, you know what they say about the modeling, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So we want to make sure that this isn't the case. And we brought on help to get us through that successfully. On dam safety funding, I had mentioned the funding that we have behind us. I did include in the packet the County of Monterey, the 2024 legislative workshop material as it relates to the Water Resources Agency. And so the priority that we're asking the county's advocates to work towards this year is the low-level outlet works at San Antonio. It's an $8 to $9 million project. We've broken it up into sub-projects over a number of years and sort of laid out in terms of priority. And so while certainly the state's fiscal situation will be challenging, and there's not likely to be state funds, if there are, we want to be able to be in a position to compete for that. And then as well, working with the county advocates on the development of bond language. There's 4 different bonds currently being talked about with respect to water, flood, or climate resiliency, and so they will be working in those arenas on our behalf. And then lastly, on the Carmel River flood model update, you will recall last year the state budget allocated $230,000 to the agency to help fund an update of the FEMA model. That funding, we received word from DWR perhaps 2 weeks ago now, that funding has been suspended as a result of the state's current fiscal situation. That's certainly a disappointment for folks that worked hard to establish that funding source, you know, and I know they'll be looking to sort of reset that funding when situations improve. But for the time being, that funding has been suspended. And then for the Association of California Water Agencies update, I have a brief report in the board packet in terms of the committee meetings. Those are just beginning now, and so we're asking our representatives on those committees, you know, when they get through a committee meeting, just jot down a brief report, what we talked about, you know, what was of interest. And so we'll get in a better habit of that going forward. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ara, and thank you for the memo you included in the packet. That was very helpful. I think the additional color and detail helps us and helps the public as well, I'm sure. So
super.
I will open up to any director comments on the general manager's report. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I too agree and appreciate the attachments there. I think that's a really good idea, really keeping all the stuff in front of us, in front of everybody, because sometimes the public, they don't realize, or they weren't at that meeting, or they didn't listen to it or whatever. But I think that's a really good format for that, so sure appreciate that. Thank you.
Any public comments on the general manager report?
Thomas Versick.
Go ahead, Mr. Versick.
Thank you, Chair. Tom Versick speaking. A minor point. On page 114 of the agenda, there's some PowerPoints that apparently, I must have missed them at the time, that were presented, I think, to the SVB GSA. There's a statement that the 5-year evaluations of high and medium GSP priorities are due January 2025 and 2027. It's partially a true statement, but just to be clear, in case this slide is relied upon by someone else one day, is that the 2025 due date is only for the critically overdrafted basins, the term DWR is using, and only the 180-400, which is mostly what is known as the pressure in this agency's jurisdiction, is the one that is due in 2025. All other high and medium priority basins, so all the rest in the GSA's jurisdiction, are due in 2027. But the fundamental point that the general manager was expressing, that there are these due dates, that of course is entirely true. And I have certainly no comment about the direction GEMS is going at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Marjorie Kay.
Go ahead, Marjorie.
Thank you. I just want to, I do see that these meetings are recorded, and now that you're back in the Board of Supervisors chambers, are they going to be on the archive video website for the county? I don't know if it's a special page for Water Resource Agency. I know when you were in the Saffron or Cayenne rooms or whatever over there at Schilling Place, I don't think they were recorded and the videos archived. So I'm just curious, because sometimes I can't always be present for your live meetings. Thank you.
Yes, they will be uploaded. I am working on that.
Thank you, Marky. Thank you, Eva. Anybody else?
No hands raised.
Perfect. All right. Well, then we will move on to committee reports. There are agendas for all those meetings in the packet as well. John, I think all of yours met. I don't know if you have any updates.
Yeah, just the BMAC. Let me see. We met on the 7th, and we discussed committee members of that BMAC committee. We have 2 vacancies. So Deidre and I discussed some changes in the bylaws after the BMAC meeting, and which you heard. Other than that, we talked about the water elevations that Guillermo gave to the board, first quarter 23-24 conditions, and we discussed well permits, and that was it for BMAC.
Res ops or finance? I don't remember.
I don't think so. Maybe I wasn't there. I don't have any notes.
Deirdre, planning met, I know.
Yes, planning met. We continue to plan. A number of things on the agenda today were brought to the planning committee. I don't really have anything specific to report.
And P&A didn't meet, and Mark's not here anyways, so that's it on committee reports. Any director's comments on any of that? Any public comment on any of those?
No hands raised.
All righty. So now we're going to do the information items. So there's a few different reports in the packet. Any director comments on any of those? Any public comment on any of the information items?
I'll say.
Go ahead.
No hands raised.
Yeah, on the letter to state legislators that the county's a participant in, it was just nice to see, I think Monterey Water Resource Agency is getting on the California state water map. So good work there.
Thank you. All right, so I guess we are moving on to Board of Directors comments. Anybody have any? Start with my right with Jason, if you have anything.
Good job, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Mike? Nope. Guys?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just wanted to let the community know, if you didn't know, Big Sur got quite a bit of rain. The highway is, unfortunately, we were hoping that the slide was going to get fixed this month and people would be able to drive down to San Luis Obispo. That is not the case. So there's a couple of new slides. There's about 50 families that are basically cut off right now. So they are doing convoys and stuff for that. So we're having a tough time. And apparently the work, I believe, General Manager is already started, about the repair for the Big Sur River erosion problem on the highway. But anyway, so things are happening down there. But yeah, it was an interesting couple of weeks. Like I'm sure many of you, particularly those on the peninsula and Pebble Beach, we got through it okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. Marvin, anything? All right. Any last minute public comments on any of the director's reports?
No hands raised.
All right, then we are adjourned.
Mr.